Chapter 28. While Hermione and Ron had mostly dropped the surveillance on Malfoy, they were right there with him, accusing Malfoy of anything and everything, mostly just to keep Dumbledore from being suspicious. Harry had started his lessons with Dumbledore that were basically glorified home movies. Honestly, all this could have been done in a few hours rather than stretching it out for the entire school year. Harry was once again struck with compassion for Tom Riddle, just like he had been last time. Harry had once been the mistreated orphan. If he had figured out that he could use magic, he probably would have used it to fight back too. All Tom had wanted was for someone to tell him that he was special, that he mattered. That was the biggest difference between them. Harry had been valued when he came to the wizarding world. Tom had been invisible. To make matters worse, Dumbledore made it seem like he'd set all of the boys' belongings on fire. Who does that to an orphan? Someone who has next to nothing and treasures every little bit they do have. Dumbledore played it off like the fact that he hadn't actually damaged anything made it okay. It didn't. He had terrified a child and made himself an enemy right off the bat. An enemy that was far more powerful than him and could destroy him so easily. Was it any wonder that a young Tom Riddle sought power? Harry kept all that to himself, of course, just like he had last time. He allowed the old man's platitudes and pretended to agree about how awful the boy was and how clearly evil he was even at 11 years old. Tom Riddle never had a chance. And now he was fighting to give all those other children out there the chance that he was never given. That Harry was never given, and people called him evil. It boggled the mind. Harry managed to save Katie Bell from the cursed necklace during the first Hogsmeade weekend. He'd been right there and knocked it out of her hand and sneakily cancelled the Imperius before the wrapping could get ripped and she could touch it. They levitated it to the castle and reported everything to McGonagall, and during their next tutoring session, Katie hugged him desperately in thanks before making a formal acknowledgement of the life debt she owed him. Harry knew that he would probably never call it in, but to deny it would be a grave insult, so he accepted it. Not long after that, Ron and Lavender got together, and Hermione started coming undone. It made it a lot easier for him to get time alone. He could just claim that he didn't want to get in the middle of their fight. Harry also grudgingly participated in the Slug Club events, taking Luna as his date whenever one was expected. She understood that he wasn't interested in more from her than friendship. He had never told her, of course, but she knew that he was in love with the Weasley twins. When Christmas rolled around, Harry was glad that he was able to leave Hogwarts again this year, until he found out that he would be going to the Burrow instead of Grimmauld Place with his godfather. Sirius was clearly not happy about it either, since he sent Harry the two-way mirrors for Christmas. Harry was surprised that he hadn't gotten them at the same time as last time, but given how much Sirius had on his mind, what with being declared innocent and the potential plot at St. Mungo's, and trying to get a mind healer through Dumbledore's refusal, it was understandable. They couldn't really talk while he was at the Burrow, given his lack of privacy with not even having bed curtains that he could silence. Once he got back to Hogwarts, though, they talked every night. He also talked with the twins every night, and Tom once or twice a week, but that one was mostly just for updates. He was spending most of his free time around the castle with Luna nowadays, so he didn't need the journal for her for the time being. It wasn't long after they got back to Hogwarts, though, that he noticed the jealousy he was starting to feel over Dean and Ginny. It seemed it was time for the love potion play. It irritated him that even when he knew it was there, he couldn't fight it. That was the insidiousness of the things. His mother would have known deep down that she despised James Potter, but wouldn't have been able to fight the feelings the potion created. She was essentially trapped in her own mind. It was worse than the Imperius. The spell could be fought off with enough willpower. A potion was different. As long as it was in your bloodstream, it was there. It couldn't be fought. So he had to deal with the monster in his chest every time he ran across Dean and Ginny together, which was often. He noticed her watching for his reaction and probably trying to figure out the best time to dump Dean for him. He'd also noticed her glaring at Luna when he wasn't paying attention. One thing Harry had no intention of changing was the poisoning of Ron on his birthday. He deserved it. He tossed Ron the tainted cauldron cakes and then dragged him down to Slughorn for an antidote to the love potion, which resulted in drinking the poisoned wine. It also resulted in the spectacular breakup of Lavender and Ron when the Reedhead muttered Hermione's name in his sleep. As much as Harry enjoyed Ron's misery, it did mean that he was back with the trio, and them dogging his every step. He only had to deal with that for a couple weeks, though, before Ginny made her move. While most of him was over the moon to be kissing her, there was the deep-down part of him, pushed to almost non-existence by this point, that remembered that he hated her. It didn't stop him from talking to the twins regularly about how amazing Ginny was and how much he loved her. It took over most of their conversations through the journals, and they weren't talking as often because of it. Not that they blamed him in any way, of course, but it still hurt to hear. And with him not being interested in talking about much else, there was little point in talking more. Harry was glad that he'd been able to keep his secrets. He'd been telling Ron and Hermione everything about his lessons, as Dumbledore had told him to, of course, but didn't bring Ginny in on it. Harry wasn't worried about telling them because it wouldn't matter. Not only were the Horcruxes not Horcruxes anymore, but Voldemort had them all in hand now, or would soon. The locket had been sent with Darby that first summer at headquarters. Harry had taken the diadem to him at the end of 5th year. Tom had Rudolphus retrieve the cup from the Lestrange vault. Dumbledore had the ring which Harry would get once he died, and he knew how to open the snitch to get it now. Even if they tried to go after them without him, it wouldn't matter. Thanks to the fact that Tom was actually providing him with help through Lucius, Draco had the cabinets done 2 weeks sooner than last time. Neither of them wanted to risk the timetable getting moved up and them not being ready. It didn't get moved up, though. Harry waited until the same day as last time to pull his memory of Slughorn's memory from the last timeline and take it to Dumbledore, and it was 2 weeks after that when they were heading to the cave. When Dumbledore sent Harry to get his cloak and get ready to go, Harry pulled out his Voldemort journal and wrote one word tonight, and then sent it with the emergency signal. Tom sent a message to Draco to be waiting for them, and then called those that he would be taking with them. Those that could be trusted to follow orders. Students are to be stunned even if they are fighting. Order members and teachers should be disabled only. There will be no killing or permanent maiming, period. The only person that dies tonight is Dumbledore. Where they had succeeded messily last time, they should have a clean victory this time. His people were better trained than ever before, and everyone knew what to expect. "May I ask, my lord, why no killing?" Rosier asked hesitantly. Voldemort didn't punish people for questions anymore, so long as they weren't disrespectful, and was perfectly willing to answer. "When we take over the ministry in the next few months, we will want as many of the people on our side as we can get, or at least willing to accept our rule. Attacking the school can be explained away, but to kill their children and those protecting them will turn them against us en masse. We don't want to rule over a graveyard. There will be many that will never fall into line," Lucius couldn't help but point out. "Then we will deal with them as necessary. Once I have the rest of the country in control, it will be far easier than finding them now and being made to be the villain. Then we can show the world what they've done wrong and why they need to be punished rather than doing it in the shadows." "My lord is most wise," Rabastan said with a bow. The next hour was spent with plans and contingencies, making sure everyone knew what they were doing and when and how. Then it was time to meet Draco in the room of requirements. Potter should be back with Dumbledore within a half hour, so that was enough time to get everyone into place. Voldemort would not be going with them. Even coming through the room, he couldn't guarantee the wards wouldn't attack him. Once Severus was headmaster, he could remove the ban, but until then it wasn't worth the risk. Hence the reason that Severus was given the chance for the killing blow. He sent them all off with portkeys to Borgin and Berks, and then settled in to wait nervously and impatiently. Harry got back with Dumbledore, who was still regaining his strength, and they flew to the astronomy tower. Dumbledore had just told Harry to go get Snape when the door burst open, and Dumbledore used his last seconds to cover Harry with the cloak and put him in a body bind before he was noticed. Draco yapped for a few minutes as expected before he was joined by a few others to help keep the old man contained. They tried to make Draco do it, but even Draco realized that he wasn't a killer. It just wasn't in him, and he hated it. It made him feel weak and worthless. Finally, Snape swooped in and cast the killing curse, and Dumbledore fell off the tower. "Go. It is done. Tell our Lord that Hogwarts is his." Once it was only him and Snape left, Harry took off the cloak since the body bind had broken when Dumbledore fell. The Order are all out of commission. I won't be seen. They are all stunned and awaiting our Lord's orders, Snape told him. Good, Harry smirked, grabbing the broom he'd flown up here and headed straight down to where Dumbledore fell. He either wanted to see the body for himself, or if he wasn't quite dead yet, give him a message. He was in luck. The man was clearly injured by the fall, but that wouldn't be able to kill him with the prophecy in play. It still hurt like a bitch, though. Harry could attest. Only the prophecy had kept him alive in his childhood. Harry knelt next to him and gave a cold smirk. I want you to know before you die, old man, I haven't been yours in years. You threw me away and had me beaten, abused, manipulated, shunned. This here, I engineered it, together with Tom. We've been working together since he was resurrected. Harry could tell that he didn't have much time left as he struggled for breath, poison coursing through his body. I win, old man, you lose, enjoy the afterlife. It was only seconds before he took his last breath, and Harry jumped back on the broom and headed back up the tower. When he saw Snape still there, he told him, Stun me. Pardon, Snape asked, surprised. Gotta make it look good. We don't want suspicion to fall too soon. We'll act during the summer. Until then, I fought for the old bastard and was stunned so that he could be killed by whoever Tom has taken the fall for it. Snape nodded in understanding and called out, Stupefy, and Harry dropped. Chapter 29. When Harry woke up in the hospital wing, the first thing he saw was Ginny sitting on the edge of his bed crying. He got up and pulled her into his arms as he looked around. She was far from the only one crying. Someone had found Dumbledore's body, apparently. Probably Snape. It took a few questions before he found out that the Lestranges were taking the fall. It made sense. They were the most recognizable of those that escaped Azkaban and would be unable to take their normal lives back. The Lestrange lordship would fall to the Malfoys, and Harry was sure that they emptied their vaults into new vaults with their new names. He wondered if it was possibly for Malfoy to hand the lordship off back to their new identities. He put the thought out of his mind. It didn't matter. It was Death Eater business and none of his. He realized that they apparently hadn't been out too long when he saw the twins rush in looking harried. They were crushed into a hug by their mother first, and then looked at Ginny in Harry's arms and made a beeline to Madame Pomfrey. We need you to flush Harry for love potions. You can't honestly be accusing your sister of, Madame Pomfrey started suspiciously. We found out that she was. We don't want her in any trouble, but Harry doesn't deserve this. Pomfrey frowned and looked between the young couple and the twins. If this is a prank, it's not. Honest. Very well, Pomfrey sighed. Better safe than sorry, but if they were wrong, she wouldn't hesitate to set their mother on them, and McGonagall too. She went to her stores and pulled out the flushing potion. Thankfully, she hadn't needed to give him any other potions tonight since he wasn't injured or in shock like some others. This would get rid of any potions in his bloodstream. She went over and handed it to him. Harry, dear, I need you to take this. What is it? Harry asked curiously, while the almost smothered part of him was cheering. The twins came through. Between that voice and his trust for Madame Pomfrey, he drank it anyway before she answered. He was handed a bin just in time as the vomiting began, and Poppy gave him a sad look. It seemed the twins were right. If there were no potions in his system, then he wouldn't have had any reaction. Everyone else looked at her, some in confusion, some in betrayal thinking she'd harmed Harry on purpose. Only Molly looked a little pale. She could guess what that potion was and immediately started shuffling people out to give poor Harry his privacy. The fewer people that knew, the better the chances of containing this. She didn't have any of the potion brewed herself and didn't know where Dumbledore kept his stash. It would take her a week to brew. Most people let Harry's surrogate mother boss them around, but not everyone. Molly didn't argue about Ginny staying. She knew anyway. The twins and Sirius both also refused to leave. There was still a part they had to play that had been planned out from before the potion started. When nothing she did convinced them to leave, she just threw up her hands. At least it would be easy to discredit those three. They were known pranksters. No one would take them seriously. Poppy might be a problem, but she was sure she could handle it. It was about 20 minutes before Harry stopped throwing up and then looked up at Ginny with hate in his eyes. You love potioned me, he accused. No, I didn't, I swear, she said honestly. Then you had someone else do it. Harry snapped and shoved her away when she reached for him. It was for us, Harry, so you could see that we were meant to be together. How dare you? he yelled, pulling his wand, and that was Fred and George's cue. Easy there, Harrikins. She's still our sister. They each grabbed one of his arms and started dragging him off while Sirius yelled at Marley. We'll just take him somewhere. To calm down, they slipped out the door with the faintly struggling Harry, and as soon as they were outside, they were surprised to see most of the Order waiting to see how he was. This would work better than expected. What is going on here? McGonagall asked, narrowing her eyes at the twins. If they were trying to sneak Harry out under Poppy's nose, they were going to be in for a world of hurt. Harry knew that he would have to be the one to answer that question. Ginny love potioned me. Madame Pomfrey gave me a flushing potion. That's why I was sick. There was a chorus of gasps, and Harry resisted the urge to smirk. Let's see Molly keep it under wraps now. We're taking him somewhere to cool off before he ends up hurting our sister. Carry on then, Misters Weasley, Flitwick said gravely, waving them to continue, and no one tried to stop them. They barely noticed everyone filing back into the hospital wing and wading into the fight that Marley had no more hope to control. Once they were around the corner, Harry stopped fighting and just walked with them to their secret room before hugging them both tightly. Thank you, he said seriously as they hugged him back just as tightly. Had it worn off in a few days like it normally would have, he would have had no witnesses, and it would have made it way too easy for them to dose him again. Always, Harry. Anything you need. Harry started to pull back, but caught Fred's eyes, and the emotion washed over them. Just before Fred started leaning in, George said firmly, Fred, don't. When they both looked at him curiously, he said, Harry's had enough done to him without his permission. You're right, Fred sighed, lowering his eyes. George wasn't letting it go at that, though, especially seeing the confusion and a hint of hope in Harry's eyes. Which is why we're asking you, Harry, can we kiss you? Harry let out a happy breath, especially at the we part. Yes, please, he all but whispered. He had barely gotten the words out when Fred's lips were on his firm and commanding, and Harry got lost in it, wrapping his arms around Fred's neck as he kissed him back. No sooner than Fred let him go, Harry felt another set of lips on his. This time gentle and coaxing and sweet, and Harry kissed George back just as lovingly. Once that kiss broke, they all moved to the couch in silent agreement, and Harry took his usual place between them as they all tried to catch their breath and calm the swirling emotions. Fred was the first to speak. Maybe we could do this more often, he asked hopefully. Are you asking me to be your boyfriend? Harry asked, amusedly hopeful. We are, George chimed in, making it clear that they both wanted him, just in case there was any question. If you're okay with both of us. Fred asked, feeling the nerves kick in. Harry smiled softly and reached a hand to each of their cheeks. How could I ever choose between you? He said gently. This time George was the first to capture his lips and then made way for Fred. Was that a yes? George asked. Yes, that was a yes, Harry nodded. But we need to keep it secret for a few more weeks. I'd like to make it to summer before getting lynched. Understandable. But we're coming out in the open before you come back next year. Most definitely, Harry agreed. The three of them spent the next couple hours cuddled together, talking, stealing kisses, and occasional tickle fights before they knew they had to get back to the rest of the world soon. Please tell me you're not going to be trapped at your relatives until your birthday, Fred asked hopefully as he nuzzled Harry's neck. No, definitely not. I will need to be careful where I'm seen until then, but that's what an invisibility cloak is for, he assured them. Then you're coming by the shop as often as you can manage, George Albert ordered. We'll key you into the wards on the back door. That way you don't have to try and get through the crowds with your cloak. Let us know when you're coming, and we'll meet you upstairs. At least one of us will, depending on how busy the store is. I'll try to come by after closing, Harry promised. That way you don't have to worry about it. Even better, George said as Harry kissed his neck. But we really should get out of here. Before we don't, Fred said as he nibbled Harry's ear. Harry turned to kiss Fred deeply, and then George before agreeing. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. His hormones were threatening to turn this into much more, and while he wouldn't say no in some circumstances, on a couch in a dirty room at school, while everyone was probably looking for them, was not his idea of an ideal first time. Chapter 30. Fred and George walked Harry to the Gryffindor common room and walked into a fight. Ron noticed them come in and walked over to Harry in a temper. You dumped my sister. Harry's jaw dropped as he looked around, getting dirty looks from all the girls and incredulous looks from a lot of the boys. He knew that Ron and Hermione hadn't been outside the hospital wing, so weren't privy to the conversation. But he hadn't expected word to spread so quickly, or for Ginny to be hamming it up and crying in Hermione's arms. "No, I didn't dump her," Harry said coldly, raising his voice to be heard over the masses. "I got a love potion flushed out. Big difference." That said, he turned and stormed up the stairs, ignoring the rising murmur behind him and trusting the twins not to let anyone curse him in the back. Anyone meaning Ron. Fred grabbed the wand from Ron's hand when he tried as Ginny cried out, "I didn't. I would never. He's lying." "Bullshit, Jin," George said angrily. "You're our sister and we'll always love you, but we're not going to let you lie to everyone and drag Harry's name through the mud. We saw the results for ourselves. We were in the hospital wing when the potion was flushed. Madame Pomfrey can confirm it, so can at least some of the teachers. McGonagall and Flitwick for two. We didn't notice who all else was there, but there were a lot of people. So give it up, Jin. Harry's not your toy anymore, and if he ends up back with you, we'll take him for a flushing potion ourselves." Their speech had the whole of Gryffindor convinced, but didn't stop the glares from Ron, Hermione, and Ginny. Only the fact that Ginny was still crying kept her from trying to hex them, but Fred did have to duck Ron's punch. "We're leaving now, but we'll leave your wand with McGonagall. You guys look after Harry, yeah?" Asked the house as a whole, but gave pointed looks to Neville, Dean, and Seamus since they shared a room. All three boys gave grave nods back, even Dean as Ginny's ex. He hadn't doubted the love story claim for a second. He knew what Ginny was like. The twins were content that they'd done as much as they could to protect Harry for the last 2 weeks. They would be there, so they headed out, stopping by McGonagall's office and giving her Ron's wand along with the story of why they had it and what had happened in the common room. She gave them a curt nod and waved them out, locking her office behind her as she made her own way to the common room. When she entered, she found it descended into chaos. "Enough!" she yelled over the din, and everyone froze. "Professor, tell them it's not true. That Ginny wouldn't love potion Harry and the twins were just playing a prank," Hermione said self-righteously. "I wish I could, Miss Granger. Unfortunately, that does not seem to be the case." That got the noise level picked up again. "Regardless," she said loudly to get their attention, "there will not be any fighting of any kind. Anyone caught fighting will be in detention until the express leaves, and possibly next year as well. Is that understood?" she said harshly, seeing that everyone got the hint that she meant business. They didn't need to deal with this sort of behavior on top of everything else they were trying to manage with the death of the headmaster. She walked over to Ron and handed him his wand. "I find out that you have attacked anyone, especially Mr. Potter. I assure you that you will not like my response. You of all people should know that there are more important things right now." She knew that all of Gryffindor would likely know about the headmaster before the announcement in the morning, but at least it was late enough that it wasn't likely to leak to other houses. "Yes, Professor." Hermione cast her eyes down. While she didn't approve of what Ginny did, she didn't think it was that big of a deal either. She would keep her mouth shut, though, and remind Ron that regardless of anything else, they still had to help Harry find the Horcruxes. Dumbledore had left them a mission, and they had to complete it. Over the last 2 weeks of school, Harry found himself guarded by other Gryffindors as much as he could be. Unfortunately, the only Gryffindors in potions were himself, Hermione, and Ron, and they managed to corner him at one point. Hermione played peacemaker and pointed out their job, and they would have to get over their fight. "We're not going, Hermione," Harry said seriously. "You can't do it alone, Harry. You need us," she told him. "I'll be fine," he told them. He wasn't going to lie outright about it, but he would let them assume that he was planning to go alone and they would try to bully their way in. Hermione would end up doing what she did last time and wiping her parents' memories. He didn't know if they would try to go without him once everything came out in the open, but he didn't really care. They would be out of his life soon anyway. He just walked away and ignored them trying to call him back. He wasn't going to tell all yet while he was still stuck in the middle of Light Central, but with Dumbledore gone, he didn't have to pretend to be friends with them anymore. Harry spent his time with Luna, Katie, and his other roommates, but mostly Neville. There was only one more potion class of the year, and that was the only class that none of his other roommates could guard him in. Ginny was completely shunned by everyone and could be heard loudly calling people hypocrites. Harry didn't disagree with her on the whole. There were a lot of girls that had tried to slip him love potions, and a lot more that probably would if they thought they could get away with it. Not all of them, of course, but a good number. Those were the ones that were upset that Ginny succeeded where they failed, and were now pretending to be appalled. That was why he mostly avoided girls on the whole, which just got them even more upset with Ginny, since he seemed to be gunchy around them all, other than Luna and Katie. Luna wasn't a surprise to most people since they'd long been friends, but Katie got quite a few looks, and Harry even got taken to the hospital wing for another flushing potion, just in case. It was Katie's last year, though, so she didn't care. She and Harry had gotten close over the 2 years she'd been teaching him, and she was glad that she could spend time with her friend out in the open. She didn't know very many of his secrets, but she did know that Dumbledore had been keeping him in the dark about his heritage and was controlling his friends. A few days before the train would run was Dumbledore's funeral. It was a complete circus. Harry would have loved to have missed it, but it would raise too many questions if he did. He was just glad that he had an excuse to avoid the Weasleys. Most of them, anyway. He sat with Fred and George on either side of him as his guards. He noticed the apologetic looks from Mr. Weasley, Bill, and Charlie, but they were either standing by Marley and Ginny like Ron was, or they just didn't think that a funeral was the best place to make a public stand. He could understand either way, and it would be worked out eventually. He had the only Weasleys he couldn't live without. Sirius was sitting behind Harry and kept a hand on his shoulder through most of the ceremony. He knew that Harry wasn't too broken up over the old man's death. They'd figured out together a lot of manipulations, but a funeral was still an emotional place, regardless of any feelings for the deceased. Once it was over and groups broke up mingling, Sirius pulled Harry aside. "How are you, pup, really?" "I'm okay, Sirius," Harry assured him, as he had every night over the mirrors since it happened. "If you're sure," Sirius sighed. "I wanted to talk to you about your plans for the summer." "I can't stay with you until my birthday, not without triggering your oath," Harry pointed out. "I know, but that doesn't mean you have to stay with your relatives either. A few months isn't a big deal in the grand scheme of things, and I can help you find a place to stay until you can get the Potter estate opened up." "I appreciate that, Sirius. I really do. I'll be okay, though," he said with a smile. "I'll be technically living there, but no one can tell me not to leave anymore. I won't be there often." Sirius gave Harry a nervous look. "See, that's what I'm afraid of. Voldemort is still out there, Harry. You have to be careful, if he catches you out somewhere." "He won't," Harry said seriously. "I promise I'll be careful, and I'll come visit you loads." "Okay, Harry, I can't lose you, kid. Not you too," Sirius said, pulling him into a crushing hug. Harry hugged him back and felt the tears in his eyes at the love in the gesture, and the fact that this might be his last hug. He would be telling Sirius everything. He couldn't keep it from him anymore. What if he hated him after? He shoved the thought away and just enjoyed the moment. "You won't, Sirius." "I'll always be around to keep an eye on you, you old mutt," he joked. Sirius pulled back, blinking the tears from his own eyes, and barked a laugh. "Hey, that's supposed to be my line." "Beat you to it." Harry grinned playfully and got a swat for it.